Okay, we've got a quick video here to show that the stock 351 Windsor oil pan, the stock oil pan, will fit with the popular Canton Windage tray. Now, I will put together some slides for this presentation that have part numbers and all that stuff. I have both the stock oil pan and the Canton popular 7-quart oil pan. The Canton pan is extremely expensive and it is an absolute tank. And I got to asking myself, do I really need that for my convertible cruiser? The answer is no. So I thought, well, let's see if this windage tray, this Canton windage tray, will fit with the stock oil pan. As I mentioned, it will fit. So some of you may already know that and you don't care about this. Some of you may have some doubts, so you can continue watching. So what I've done here is I've already done the modeling clay check. Then what I decided to do was take just 3M foam tape and put some 30 weight motor oil on it. And then what I do is I will be setting the oil pan down in this video without the gasket to see if any of that brown motor oil transfers to the oil pan. If it does, then I have to question whether I have enough clearance. Now you may be thinking, well, what's the thickness of the gasket? I'm using the popular Fel-Pro one-piece gasket, which is not shown in this video, but I will include the part number. And the little ferrules to keep you from over compressing the gasket, they're exactly 1/10 of an inch thick, which I measured. The foam tape's about 0.4, so you got 140 thousandths clearance without the gasket and with the foam tape. So that's your margin. So if it passes, you've got 140 thousandths of clearance, the 0.1 plus the 0.4 for the tape. So that was my rationale. You can see there's tape on the other side too. Now these locations, what I have found from experience, and I've done this check about 10 times, is the aft portion of the windage tray where the stock oil pan slopes down is the problem area, and this area here too. That's the problem areas, and I had to do some trimming, which I will talk about later in the video. I'll show you pictures of where I trimmed. And you have to do some sheet metal bending. Now, this is a 393 stroker, so you will have to see, you'll see some bulbousness there where I've had to do some hand forming and bending to clear the 393 stroker crank throws. Quite frankly, it's pretty easy. It's a little tedious. It's going to take you a few hours. There will be some pictures in this presentation showing stroker clearance from the connecting rods to the tray. So that's not an issue. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to stop the video and I'm going to position this so I can drop the pan down and show you that when you drop the pan down here with no gasket, and then pick the pan back off, there will be zero oil transfer to the pan, which is quite obvious because the pan is brand new and it's really clean. So I'm going to stop here and we'll pick it up. So what I'm about to do, as I mentioned earlier, is I'm going to drop this Summit Racing 51 Windsor oil pan stock replacement. As you can see, at least I hope you can see it, it's perfectly clean. I mentioned earlier, I've done this check about 10 times already. I do not peel the foam tape off on the oil side. It's better to let it just sit there so that it's not prone to sinking in to the sticky part of the tape. I've done it both ways. It's better just to let it sit there. That way, if it touches the pan at all, it is going to transfer to the pan. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to set the pan down. Now, there's no gasket as I mentioned. I'm just going to set it down. There's no reason to scrunch it or anything. You just set it down as even as you can. Okay. Let it sit an hour. Okay, that's a joke. Now, Picking it up, we're going to see if there's any oil transfer in the pan. I pick it up, I'm going to check myself first. So you can see, I hope you can see that. There is nothing. Now I have done this about 10 times because you don't want to make a mistake here. There's no reason to keep doing it. There's no oil transfer whatsoever. So what that means is with the gasket and the foam tape, we got about 140 thousandths of clearance. Therefore, I am not worried about clearance from this Canton Windage tray to the stock oil pan. You may be thinking, what about going forward? You didn't check anything there. As you can see, the oil pan slopes up there, right? I did check that. As it slopes up, there is absolutely no clearance issues whatsoever. That's why you don't see the foam tape all over everything. This is a milling standard volume oil pump, standard pickup. We all know that works with the stock oil pan. That's why none of that stuff is modeled up. Anyway, I'll put some other things in a voiceover PowerPoint, including some part numbers. Hope this helps. Okay, I mentioned that the Canton Windage tray requires some trimming to fit a stock oil pan. It definitely does, and I want to show you where I trimmed it. There's a picture of the stock configuration in the PowerPoint section of this video. And what I had to do is basically cut back as much as I could here without disturbing the welds. And I had to do that on the back and on the sides here. That's been trimmed back. So I was getting interference in here. So when Canton says it will fit the stock oil pan, it won't. Now, the interference was minor. See how that's been cut back? The interference was minor, but interference is interference. And it was touching with the stock oil pan. Now, it was touching with the Fel-Pro one-piece gasket torqued down. So when Canton says on the Summit Racing ad, fit stock oil pan, it doesn't. Now, if it was touching the oil pan, it wasn't touching it much. I did a modeling clay check, and I'm sorry, I forgot to take a picture of that. It snatched it down flat. And I also did an oil transfer check. About here is where I was getting touching. The contact was minor. It wasn't that you couldn't put the oil pan on like it was a hard interference, but it was real. And I think that if it was touching those areas of the oil pan, would it have caused harm? Probably not. The amount of relative motion is really restricted to vibration, but you're not supposed to have interference. So if you want to use the Canton Windage tray with your stock oil pan, you can do it, but you will have to take some time to cut these back. Now these are all smoothed out with a die grinder, and I also hit it with some grinding stones, basically to smooth and deburr the edges so it won't cut my delicate hands. So yes, it will fit, but you will have to alter it back here, and then it'll be fine. Some people were asking about, hey, how's that, you've got those ARP main studs, how's the clearance to the stock oil pump? It's tight, but there is plenty of clearance. So you got the ARP main stud here. There's plenty of clearance. That's the popular ARP oil pump drive shaft. That's a nice piece. So that's fine. The stock pickup and stock oil pump. I'm going to have a video on pressure squirting lubrication from the lifter gallery to the timing chain later on, and we'll talk about that stock oil pump and pickup. I do think that the stock oil pumps are fine, and I think the high volume oil pumps are normally not required. So we'll talk about that later. But anyway, It's a nice windage tray. It will fit with a stock oil pan, and I'm a big fan of windage trays. Even though the horsepower is only a couple horsepower gain, it's doing something besides freeing up some horsepower. It's keeping the oil where it's supposed to be. It's reducing sloshing and frothing, and I think there's benefits to that. So, will it result in increased gas mileage? God, I hope, you know. Okay, back to the other portion of the video. Thanks for listening.
All right. This is the voice overview PowerPoint portion of the video, and we'll discuss some helpful specifics. So we'll look at an overview. I try in my videos always give part numbers. Drives me crazy when I see an informative video. You don't know what part the guy's using. So then we'll get into the windage tray trimming for the oil pan clearance. It's really the purpose of this video. Also, this is a 393 stroker, so we'll look at the stroker clearance from the connecting rods to the tray, and then we'll end with some recommendations. Okay, so started with an overview. So there's part numbers. You can see the prices about as today. So you'll note here that Canton says it's designed to fit stock or aftermarket oil pans. I don't think Canton is lying about it. It's kind of typical aftermarket parts. They're not giving you enough information. So I'm telling you that it will not fit a stock oil pan without trimming the rear area and some sides in the tray. It's pretty mild stuff, and when you do that, it will fit. So with the Fel-Pro gasket in place and torqued, interference was observed in the rear area and sides of the pan. But I was able to do some trimming, and we got some clearance with good margin, and we'll get into that. Okay, so here's some part numbers. There's the Canton Windage tray, the ARP main studs. You can get the Canton studs for its tray, but that's going to cost you about another 120 bucks. If you use the ARP studs, there's the part number. It's 4 windage trays. Doesn't matter what windage tray it is. You have to cut them down, so that's a bit of a pain. You don't have to do that with the Canton studs, but you don't want to spend the extra 120 bucks. So I think I had cut this one down yet, but I hadn't cut the other one, so you can kind of see those. This looks like rust, but it's Permatex Ultra Slick. Okay, so let's move on. The Canton Pan overview. First and foremost, it's expensive. It's also a tank. It's 16 pounds. Is it well built? A nice piece? It is. It takes up a lot of real estate, and it's heavy. And did I mention it's expensive? Now, a lot of people are probably watching this going, I don't care about any of this. I'm going to use the Canton Oil Pan. I'm going to use the Canton Windage Tray, and they're going to bolt up. No, they won't. I found out. Now, I have this. I've got this pan. You will have interference with that side skirt. And quite frankly, I thought that the Canton pan with the Canton windage tray would just bolt up. And a lot of people, I think that's normal to think that. But nope, you're going to have to do something with the windage tray to make it fit even with the Canton pan. Now, this video doesn't get into that because that's not the solution I pursued. Okay, here's some part numbers I used. There's the stock oil pan. That's the upshot of the video. I'm using the stock oil pump, the stock pickup. Those were non-issues. So windage tray trimming. So as I kind of mentioned, it's the aft portion of the windage tray that required trimming. Now trimming really means removing material. You won't be able to bend it. Some of the sides areas, which I'll get into, required some discretionary trimming. Okay, so here it is installed on my 393. The red circles, you've got to trim that area. You can see how it's shorter here where I trimmed off. That's the stock length. Just do that with a death wheel slowly and safety goggles, and you'll be able to get it off okay. Won't be able to bend it, it's too stiff. You'll be able to do this without cutting through any welds. The green circle's discretionary. There was no interference with the gasket in place, but there was slight interference without the gasket. So I did some discretionary trimming there, and I went all the way forward. Farther forward you go, you don't have any interference issues at all. But that's why I call it discretionary. Let's look at the other side. Same deal with the other side. Red arrows, the material's got to go. Okay, so I did do a model clay check after trimming. You can see the compression. I didn't measure it. You can just qualitatively see that's fine. So that's with the gasket in place and torqued down. I apologize, I didn't take a before pic prior to trimming. That showed the modeling clay compressed flat with the gasket torqued down. So when I saw that, I just moved on to trimming the portions of the tray that needed it. Okay, so I did the modeling clay as you recall. I also decided to do this. This is 3M foam tape, and you can see this in the video too, so I won't duplicate everything I said. You can do it with or without the backing tape in place. This is one with the backing tape removed. And you just put the 30 weight oil on there. And as you saw in the video, you do the oil transfer check with the pan. So the Fel-Pro gasket, the little anti squeeze out ferrule, whatever you want to call it, it's a full tenth. That may seem like a lot. It's not a hundredth, it's a tenth. So then the foam tape is 0.4, so you got 140 thousandths margin. That's pretty good margin. So what that means is, like you saw in the video with the oil pan, is if you don't have any oil transfer, you've got that much margin when you do have the gasket in place and no tape, of course. Okay, that portion was pretty straightforward. So take note that even though the Canton says it'll fit strokers, you are going to have to do some sheet metal forming here, just some hand forming and bending. And it's tedious. It'll take you a couple hours, but check the clearance. And you know the generally accepted stroker clearance rule is 60 thousandths. I usually give hyperlinks with sources, but that has been generally accepted. It's kind of all over the place. Engine Builder magazine cites that all the time. So I used the coat hanger and measured that, and that's 70 thousandths. So you can see in these pictures, you just get down on your hands and knees and you rotate this thing through and make sure you check all critical areas. So I think this was the worst one. Same hanger there. That this was the closest. You know, it's the same connecting rod, but you rotate it through and you find which area is the tightest. So the one on the right is the area that had the least amount of clearance, but it's still greater than 70 thousandths. So we're good there. Like I said, this is tedious. It'll take you a while. You will have to do some hand forming, but bending, but it can be done. Okay, so this vertical clearance from the crank counterweights, connecting rods, this is a lot of clearance and didn't require any measuring or any adjusting. It qualitatively, it's completely acceptable. So brief discussion recommendations. You know, you have to ask yourself, because I did, because keep in mind, I bought this pan. I bought the pan and the stock pan, the Canton pan and the stock pan. Do you really need that heavy, large, it takes up a lot of real estate, and expensive oil pan for your street strip car? I think a lot of people are like, well, normally no, but I need that high volume oil pump and I don't want to go drag racing or any spirited driving and suck the oil pan dry. I think we need to ask ourselves, do you really need that high volume oil pump for your street strip car, especially if it's a brand new engine with proper bearing clearances? What is the high oil pump? What is the high volume oil pump doing? You know, there are thousands, there's probably tens of thousands of people have gone drag racing small block Fords with stock oil pans and stock oil pumps, and they never had any problems. I know somebody's thinking, well, I know a guy who had a problem, and maybe there are some high horsepower applications where somebody was drag racing a 10-second car with a stock oil pan and actually did suck it dry. But I think what probably happened there is people used high volume oil pumps with stock oil pans and then had a problem. So a lot of people have gone racing with stock pans, stock pumps, and including myself, 40 or 50 times. And when I took the engines apart, there was no bearing wear at all. There was no bearing wear indicative of oil starvation. So certainly, there are applications that are going to require this. Extended high RPM, that's not maximum RPM, but SCCA type road race with extended high RPM usage, you probably need more oil anyway, and you need baffling, windage tray, all that. Yeah, definitely, I would do this without hesitation. But anyway, thanks for listening. And I think the upshot is if you're like me and you like windage trays, but you don't want the expensive tank of the Canton Oil Pan, you can make it work. Okay, take care, everybody.